Jay, how's it going?
It's going good.
Good. Well, we lost contact with you earlier, and now you're back on the air. What did you want to talk about?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's my first time calling in on your show or any ACA show. Just wanted to talk to Faraday Speaks about his journey and the alt-right in general. I know he said he went down a spiral, so I was wondering if he had any idea on what might be really causing this kind of resurgence of alt-right views and ideas. What does he really think is causing that much sentiment to be back so large again? And I know it's definitely not Trump. It has to be something else. So what does he really think is causing it, and how do we stop it and change the cycle altogether?
Lots of things. I can just give you a few theories that I have. First, we have the rebranding of white supremacy that we've always had. We have always had since the Nazis. They were good at what the Nazis did was they took people's anxieties about other groups, their prejudices, and they developed them into very concrete ideology. And those have been passed down through history and rebranded because they constantly need to get liberals, centrists, to believe that stuff. And as society liberalizes, they need to take things like cultural Bolshevism, which is the theory that the Jews rule the world, and they turn it into cultural Marxism, which is this theory that Marxists rule the world. And so it's this constant rebranding. Then what else goes on is we have the internet, which fuels and drives it. Edgy humor on the internet drives this, and Nazis like edgy humor, and they propagate edgy humor. Platforms like 4chan were big, foundational starting points for a lot of this stuff. Even toxic online gamer culture, screaming at each other, racial slurs and mic chats contributes to this. In terms of like more social type things, there's a lot of reaction to left-wing movements, to things like social justice. You'll hear Sam Cedar talk about this a lot, where when people lose privilege in life, they feel attacked and they feel like they're losing something. And there's a reaction and a backlash to that. We also have a big problem with disenfranchised white men in society. They feel like society's left them behind. In a lot of ways it has. That's not the fault of LGBT or feminists or any of that stuff. It's the fault of globalization. It's the fault of automation. Basically, the fault of things like capitalism, which has put them in economic situations where they're not able to flourish. And people come in, stoke those fears and anxieties. These people are out of work. They spend a lot of time on YouTube, and they get wrapped up and absorbed into that stuff. And then just generally, like I said, socioeconomic and emotional problems that people have in their life. Whenever you feel lost and purposeless, you're more susceptible to ideologies and extremist movements. This is how cults work.
That's true. I agree with you. I agree 100% everything you said. But honestly, sitting and looking at it and looking at the world with automation and everything that's happening, I only see that those things kind of getting worse. Maybe not just for the cis white male, but for every single male, because the social dynamic of the world is kind of changing and we're trying to get more inclusive. But then my question that I always try to ask everyone I know is, how do we ensure that the people who felt important in the past still feel important now, and everybody else that we want to make important, and they feel it, so that people don't feel like they're losing anything, which I haven't found the answer yet. I was just wondering if you had any insight. I like what you said and I agree with it. So yeah, that was my main question. For you though, personally, was there any major factor or anything majorly in your life that caused you to reevaluate your position?
So I'm not going to try to say there was one event in my life, because it didn't work that way. It was a culmination of events and learning different ideas. What I will say is perception and perspective. So learning to see things from other people's perspective. And it's just like Dan said earlier, he realized that all the opinions, and I don't know what his beliefs were at the time, but he said that he had certain thoughts about gay people. And it wasn't until he talked to actual gay people that he was like, oh, that's not what I thought. You can't talk to straight white guys about what black people are going through. Just like you can't talk to a black guy about what straight white guys are going through. You have to go to listen to people and hear things from their perspective and have the conversations. That's a big problem we have right now. Is we're having too much debate and not enough conversation. And the only way you can gain perspective is through conversation.
Yeah,
I agree.
if there's one thing that people really don't like, it's people don't like being written off. People don't like if somebody said to me like, "Oh, you're just an atheist. Nothing you say really matters because you don't believe in God. You do this and that," right? Like just picking that one particular label that applies to me. Well, I'm not really gonna be interested in what this guy is gonna be saying after that, right? Because he's not taking me seriously. At least I don't feel like this person is taking me seriously. And people like to be taken seriously. Even people who have kind of the more outlandish and maybe even ridiculous ideas, I found, especially by doing this show, is that just have conversations with them, be willing to go the extra mile with them, and you'd be surprised at how much distance you can cover with people. But if you come into conversation with a sneer and a jab, and you're just like, "Oh, you just blah, blah, blah," that it puts people off. It puts people in a place where they feel like they have to defend themselves now. So suddenly they're not listening to you anymore. They are in defensive mode, trying to defend what they already believe, and they might find new ways of justifying what they already believe because of that. And your conversation might have done more harm than good at that point. So just two thoughts, two cents, not two thoughts, but yeah.
2 cents. Yeah, I agree. I think I agree 100%. We do need to have a whole lot more conversations about the issues and a lot less of debating. But sometimes I find it hard to talk to people or get certain ideas across that they've already expressed or you've heard from them. Maybe you're around them and you just realize that that's their idea. So it's sometimes hard to address that. But yeah, I do agree 100% that the conversations are what's needed. And with the conversation, we'll be able to build bridges between communities and ensure everyone kind of just feels appreciated and important. Yeah,
absolutely.
Oh, I'll go and follow you, Faraday. I haven't watched any of your videos, but I'll definitely go and follow you and watch some of your videos.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
Cool.
I don't mind listening to the alt-right. I'm a liberal person, but I like to hear alt-right ideas because they conflict with my own, and the only way to grow is to really say things that you're not sure about or you don't like, and then you get to reevaluate your own position, and then you get to be a better person overall by doing all that. So yeah.
Well, if you want to attempt to have the conversations or try to learn how, come over to the Discord channel and we'll talk with you.
Oh yeah, for sure, I will.
Cool. Jay, thanks for the call. That was really interesting.
Hey, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah, there is this debate of like how much we should allow the conversation to go. Like at what point does just even having the conversation become, damaging for people? Do you have thoughts about this debate?
So here's the thing. Debate does work. For example, when Destiny debated Lawrence Southern, what he did, and I like to think of this in like evolutionary terms, to just break it down simply. We're a hierarchical species, and people put people at the top. There's a top chimp. And I'm not saying this is a scientific explanation of this, but you have that top chimp, and people look up and respect that person. If someone else can come in and embarrass them and prove them wrong and all these things in a debate, in a very public setting, it will put some people further away, but it can bring some people back because they realize how ridiculous the person that they were following really is. That does work. But on the smaller settings, conversation is preferable. Now, a conversation, if you have a softball conversation with someone like Richard Spencer on a national stage, you're only giving him a platform to spread his propaganda. And so you don't want to do that. You want to do responsible platforming. But that's my thoughts on that. Conversation doesn't work with a fascist that is going to co-opt free speech. This is why you'll always hear Richard Spencer go, maybe he's kind of toned back, but what they were doing back then, just a year or two ago, was free speech. They're censoring our free speech. And fascists don't care about free speech. Fascists are co-opting that movement, liberal movements, to spread their message. And what they're good at is softening that message and rebranding that message so it's palatable to liberals.
Interesting. Wow. I want to remind people that, yes, We are still live and we are still taking calls. We want to take a few more calls before we wrap up the show here in a bit. We'll probably do one or two more. Our lines are currently open right now for anybody to come talk to Caleb, or Faraday Speaks, as you might know him by. Man, it sounds like you have been doing the research, Caleb. Sounds like you have been really looking into the stuff. You've been taking this really seriously. How do you feel compared to back when you had different kinds of beliefs? Do you feel more informed? Do you feel different attitudes about yourself than you did before? Like, are those some of those feelings you felt about yourself still kind of present, or do you feel like more of kind of a peace of mind?
Well, I will say, like, if I come up like I'm very informed, I do have an intuitive understanding of the alt right and a lot of these reactionary movements. I like to say that I spent about 5 years in that movement. I like to say I have like a master's in bullshit, or a BS in BS. So that helps. And then coming out, I did do a lot of research into fascism and how these organizations and operations work. And I try to keep up on as many things as possible. The way I feel now as opposed to back then is I don't feel any less curious. I don't feel smarter now. What I do feel, though, is I'm a lot more open-minded, and I'm a lot less dogmatic in my thinking. And I do feel a lot more free and open from that. Now, I've also learned to like open myself up emotionally, and that helps a lot. And to anybody that's not done that, do that. Don't do it around dangerous people, but be vulnerable around the people that are vulnerable with you. And emotionally, I'm a lot more relieved and feel less pressure. But also intellectually, I feel a lot less pressure now that I don't have to dogmatically buy into things. The world's a lot scarier now because now it takes work to understand things in a nuanced way. But I feel a lot more free. I don't feel like hemmed in by any particular ideology anymore.
Ooh, man, I want to ask you something about that. You said, don't be vulnerable with people that are dangerous. I think that's kind of interesting because, you described yourself as someone at a place before where you felt like you were vulnerable to kind of these ideas because of your emotional state and because of your economic status and stuff like that. Do you see kind of a parallel there between like where you are now and the ability for you to be vulnerable and the vulnerability you felt back then?
Yeah, so I am vulnerable with dangerous people now, but it's a controlled vulnerability. And that mostly comes down to when I'm having conversations with people on the alt-right. And so I'll open up to them, but I can do that because I've become a public figure now. My life is out there. But yes, I've never thought about it that way. It's interesting. Like I opened myself up completely to this movement, and I was very vulnerable, and they took advantage of that. And part of what I want to do with this platform is we don't want to be gurus, we don't want to be mental health professionals, but we want to give people tools to help themselves, but we want to give it away for free. I don't want you to become a progressive and vote for my candidate. I don't need you to do any of that stuff. I just want to give help out for free because people are hurting. And so I'd like to do kind of like what was done to me, but in a positive way. Give people a safe place to be vulnerable with. But people should always be skeptical of who they're being vulnerable with. Most people do that with close friends or family in your life.
Man, I like that answer. I wanted this show to be a place where people could feel like they could be vulnerable with me and feel like this was a safe place for them to talk about some of their ideas. Because that was something I definitely wish I had back in the day for me when I couldn't talk to people. And now, there's a lot more platforms out there where people can kind of talk and discuss about these things. And I'm thankful for that. I really am. But I wonder of myself sometimes if I was to take a time machine and go back, would I be the kind of person to call into a show like this? And so like part of the way I try to structure things here is like, okay, I want this to be a show that the person that I was last time would want to call into, so we can kind of have these discussions and work things out with people because this is a platform that's designed for those kinds of conversations in mind. I definitely don't want this to be an echo chamber for people who already think the way that I do. I want to talk to as many kinds of people as I can, right?
100%. That's my big fear. I don't want to become an echo chamber. I have a lot of supporters that agree with me, and I love them, and I want to do things that they enjoy. I want to cultivate an atmosphere that they're comfortable in. But I also want to cultivate an atmosphere that everybody's comfortable in a safe way so that I can reach out to people like where I was, people like where you were. It sounds like so. I
Yeah.
totally agree.
Yeah, and what I will say is, I think your story really does resonate with people, and that's something that people should take note of, to see that, oh, look, this is where people are kind of gravitating towards, because they're able to relate to this on a level that, a logical argument might not be able to resonate with people. Not to say that you shouldn't use the logical arguments. Obviously, you should be. You try to be rational. You should try to be forward thinking, and try to predict objections people might have to some of the things that you're saying. But like, personality is what makes us human, and it plays into the way that we have our conversations, whether we like it or not, right? Sometimes I wish I could put my brain inside a robot and just kind of process the world as objectively as possible, right? But like, that's just not the world that we live in, for better or for worse. And it's important to take in, those feelings into account when you're having these conversations, right?
Yeah, 100%. A lot of people think they come to ideologies and stuff logically, and they do to a large degree. People listen to the arguments, and they look and they try to pick the best option that they think is best for their situation. But emotion is such a driver for us. You've studied the brain, you know how that works. It's such a big desire, more, I should say. People, whatever your desire is, you're going to look for something to fill that. And people use politics for that. People use religion for that. People especially use religion for that. And you have to take it into account. And you can't just write it off. We're not robots.
Mm-hmm. So now that you're out there on the public, and we'll try to wrap things up here in just a second, but now that you're out there and you're talking politics specifically, like you're talking, all these different issues that you're really interested in, are you worried that you are going to fall into the same trap that you kind of did before?
Yeah, so anybody that comes out of my experience, I've talked to a lot of different people. And the people that have went really far like I did, they have that fear. They all share that fear. We all share that fear. And so you try to take it slow. You try to keep yourself in check when you feel yourself falling for something emotionally. You become more aware of when that's happening. I feel like I'm inoculated to that to a large degree. Of course, it's always possible. Everybody's vulnerable to movements and ideologies. But I just try to check in with myself emotionally. I try to make sure I'm as healthy as possible so that I'm not falling into something to fill a hole. And it's a lot like someone that gets into a toxic relationship. You fall into a toxic relationship, you get sucked in by a person. But then once you get out of it, hopefully you're more aware of the dynamic of what happened to you, and then you try to avoid that going forward.
Mm, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Caleb, this has been a wonderful conversation with you. Thank you so much for being on here. I think we got one more call here online, and we'll try to talk to them in just a second. But man, like, I can't imagine what I know a little bit of what it's like to be in your shoes, to kind of have your experience out there and stuff. And that's kind of interesting that I could relate to you in that way. And that's actually how, when I first messaged you, that's kind of what I put out to you first. I was like, hey, I went through kind of a similar thing you did. But your thing is like, you got way more popular than I ever did, which is fine. Like, I'm glad that people are kind of relating to you in some sort of way. Have you faced any like personal backlash from your family and stuff like that? Does your family know about this? Does anybody in your personal life know about this?
So in my second video, I talked a lot about my family and how I don't really have close relationships with them. I have a close relationship or semi-close relationship with a sibling, and there was some backlash there because they disagree with me politically. But we're not at odds with each other. I've had backlash with friends that disagree with me politically, but we've made amends. There's some people that have fallen out of my life, but to be honest with you, those people were toxic, and I'm happy with the people that I'm with now. I'm surrounded by like some really awesome people. And so I've had struggles and conflicts with some people, but for the most part, we've made up and found common ground.
That's wonderful. That's really great. I'm glad that you're able to have positive relationships with people in your family
Yeah.
and able.
And also I've had relationships, in particular, I had a trans friend who I lost during all this. I told her to go off HRT and to go get mental health.
Oh.
to go get therapy, and she blocked me. And then after I came out of all this, I apologized and we reconnected, and we're really close again, and that's awesome, man.
That's
I'm so happy for
wonderful.
that.
That is so wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that even though like that conversation happened, but like see, like people remember those conversations, right? Like people remember those big important moments, and then people go back to it. It happens. It really does. It's really magical. I have a few more calls here if you're willing to talk to these
Yeah,
people
I've
for just a
got
second.
plenty of time.